Hello and welcome to this training session. My name is Eric Whitehead and I will be presenting the session on NEPA assignment training for self-assessments and Federal Highway Administration Audit 101. The training today again will be for self-assessments and the Federal Highway Administration audits. This training will emphasize our readiness for both the self-assessment and the audit. The self-assessment is a slightly different version of the quality assurance reviews we are used to, with more emphasis on Office of Environmental Management review of our systems and processes we have in place to ensure our environmental documents are complete and compliant. This means most of the work will fall to OEM reviewing project documents and SWEP with very little impact on the district operations during this process. We have always been audited. The difference with the new set of Federal Highway Administration audits is that we are being proactive with an audit support plan that explains the audit process and gives you tips for handling an audit interview. With a little more preparation, we anticipate the districts and OEM will have an easier audit experience. The 5 lessons in our learning objectives are OEM self-assessment process, OEM and district roles in the self-assessment, connecting the self-assessment and Federal Highway Administration audit, the audit process, and preparing for the Federal Highway Administration audit. Lesson 1 covers self-assessment authority and purpose, scope, performance measures, self-assessment process stages, and report drafting and distribution. Authority for the self-assessment is the MOU due to FDOT assuming NEPA. OEM will perform annual self-assessments of its program to ensure compliance with the law, MOU, and FDOT's manuals and procedures. The self-assessment will also be to ensure our QA/QC plan process is functioning as intended, and we will identify successful practices along with opportunities for improvement. The scope of the self-assessment is the 4 MOU performance measures, evaluating a sample of NEPA approvals and decisions to determine compliance, and a review of previous self-assessment and Federal Highway Administration audit issues. All of these sources will be used for target issues. The self-assessment will focus on the pre-audit questions due to the short period of time as a NEPA assignment state and not enough opportunity for implementation of NEPA assignment policies and procedures. The first self-assessment will also evaluate FDOT's readiness with policies and procedures in place for implementation. Performance measurement is not new to FDOT. Our NEPA measures are based upon data and systems we currently have in place. Data compilation will happen in SWEP and should not have an impact, or at least a significant impact, on the districts. Every self-assessment will evaluate the status of the 4 MOU performance measures. On A, compliance with NEPA regulations, and other federal environmental statutes and regulations, which includes maintaining documentation regarding compliance with responsibilities assumed under this MOU. And B, QA/QC for NEPA decisions, which includes completion of legal sufficiency reviews by FDOT's Office of General Counsel and compliance with FDOT's environmental document content standards and procedures, including those relating to QA/QC. Also, we have C, relationship with agencies and the general public, which includes maintaining communication, considering timeliness and responsiveness among FDOT, federal and state resource agencies, Indian tribes, and the public, providing opportunities for public involvement and comment, and use NEPA issue resolution process as appropriate. And the final one, D, increase efficiency and timeliness in completion of the NEPA process. And this is comparing time of completion of environmental documents, document approvals before and after assumption of NEPA responsibilities. Self-assessments are program reviews to determine compliance with the provisions of the MOU and NEPA requirements. and to identify successful practices and opportunities for improvement. The three phases of a self-assessment are planning, taking up to 30 days, evaluation taking up to 30 days, and reporting taking up to 15 days. These phases will be explained in more detail in the coming slides. Self-assessments include a planning stage that involves review initiation, selection of a team, notification to districts, and a pre-assessment survey and determination of target issues. To initiate a self-assessment review, the QA/QC coordinator will open a new file, develop and obtain approval for a review plan, and initiate tracking in the SWEP tracking system. The OEM director or designee appoints a self-assessment team at the beginning of each annual self-assessment. The team will be comprised of the QA/QC coordinator and at least 2 staff from within OEM depending on the topics to be covered in the review. The self-assessment team may consult with subject matter experts and consultants as needed during the self-assessment process. Team members will coordinate with district personnel as needed. Each team member is responsible for documenting all interviews, document reviews, file reviews, and any work effort directly related to the self-assessment. The director of OEM notifies all districts that a self-assessment is beginning. A kickoff webinar is scheduled for districts to discuss the self-assessment process, expectations, and timeframes. The self-assessment team administers the pre-assessment survey. The survey is sent to district environmental managers, district project managers, OEM managers, and OEM document reviewers for a period of 7 days. Survey results are tabulated and reported to OEM management. Results are used with other data sources to determine target issues. The director of OEM will select target issues based on NEPA performance results, previous year experience as summarized by OEM management, pre-assessment survey results, and previous self-assessments and Federal Highway Administration audits. OEM QA/QC coordinator will pull a sample of projects from a population of NEPA approvals and decisions from the previous year. The review team will conduct a desk review of selected projects. The primary tool for the self-assessment is SWEP, which houses project files and documents, and will include Type 1 and Type 2 CEs, EA FONSIs, DEIS, FEIS/RODs, Section 4F determinations, and status of environmental certification forms. The evaluation stage also includes on-site visits to district offices as needed, interviews with district and resource agency staff, interviews with other stakeholders as needed, regular self-assessment team meetings, and a final meeting to discuss and document findings and observations. Self-assessment team will draft a report or review findings, observations, and follow-up actions within 7 days of the evaluation stage. The draft report will be circulated to districts for a 7-day review and comment period. A report is developed and submitted to OEM management for review and approval, then a summary report to Federal Highway Administration at least 1 month prior to Federal Highway Administration audit. We are now ready for a poll question, which is, what is covered in a self-assessment? And the options are A, performance measures, B, compliance with NEPA and federal environmental laws, and C, both. The response for this question is C, both. We have a second poll question, which is, a self-assessment team will review project files and documents, interview district staff as needed, and prepare a report of findings. And the response options for this question are A, true, and B, false. The correct answer is A, true. Lesson 2 will provide a refresher of QA/QC from the main presentation and cover roles for OEM and the districts. This graph shows that OEM is the nucleus of the self-assessment process, responsible for implementing and coordinating all aspects of the process. QA/QC in particular are key to the success of the NEPA assignment program and will be a focus of both the self-assessment and the Federal Highway Administration audit. The next couple of slides provide a refresher on consultant and district roles with QA and QC. Quality control and assurance is currently required. This is not new to FDOT. Quality control and assurance start with the consultant, who must thoroughly understand FDOT requirements and conduct quality checks at every stage during and after document development. To this end, consultants must develop individual QC plans, stick to those plans, check for errors and omissions before submitting documents to the district, certify that QC has been conducted along with the submittal, and maintain a record of markups and the QC certification. Once the district receives the environmental document, the district will assure quality has happened. The district will hold consultant accountable for sticking to the QC plan, provide feedback and changes through the electronic review comment system, use technical reviewers and other district resources, ask OEM for help as needed, and maintain QC records and upload final documents in SWEPT. In the self-assessment process, districts help determine the annual target issues for the review of NEPA approvals and decisions. Districts will also be asked to answer questions and provide information related to NEPA projects, will be able to use self-assessments for establishing priorities for continual improvement, and will collaborate with OEM in developing an implementation action plan and in resolving issues identified during the self-assessment process if needed. OEM will use self-assessments to share and promote successful practices, provide a summary report of findings and observations to Federal Highway Administration, identify opportunities for improvement to promote quality initiatives, and review district action plans for feedback to districts within 10 days. OEM will also track and monitor action plan implementation and the resolution of any issues identified during the self-assessment. This very brief section covers the connection between the self-assessment and the Federal Highway Administration audit. At least 1 month prior to the date of a scheduled on-site audit, FDOT will send a summary of its self-assessment to the Federal Highway Administration Florida Division Office. This must happen before the audit starts. The summary will include scope and areas reviewed, descriptions of the process, successful practices, areas needing improvement, corrective actions, and a statement from the Director of OEM. This director statement is a draft sample to be used in all self-assessment reports. This statement is consistent with the provisions of the MOU. Now we are ready for another poll question, which is, self-assessments are not connected to the Federal Highway Administration annual audit. And the response options are true, A, and B, false. The correct response is false, B, false. The self-assessments are definitely connected to the Federal Highway Administration annual audit. We are now on lesson 4. Remember, we have an audit support plan to help us with the Federal Highway Administration audit process. With your help, OEM can make this process productive and positive. This section will focus on the audit process to provide insight on what OEM and the districts can expect before, during, and after an audit. Understanding the process will help everyone have a more productive audit experience. 23 U.S. Code Section 327G requires Federal Highway Administration to conduct 4 annual program audits of FDOT to evaluate compliance with federal environmental laws, adherence to the MOU, and achievement of the NEPA performance measures. Audits are also used for the U.S. DOT Secretary's annual report to Congress. The audit focus will be on 7 core areas, which include staffing, technical competency and organizational capacity, adequacy of financial resources, quality assurance and quality control, attainment of performance measures, compliance with MOU requirements, and compliance with federal laws and policies. Federal Highway Administration will not evaluate specific project-related decisions, as these are the sole responsibility of the state. The substance of how you reach your decisions from the PD&E chapters is not under review. OEM has developed an audit support plan to help FDOT to prepare for the Federal Highway Administration audits. The plan focuses on coordination and communication with Federal Highway Administration, providing Federal Highway Administration with needed information and access to records and staff, and keeping FDOT and OEM management aware of audit activities and reporting. The audit support plan is a part of the OEM QA/QC plan. The OEM audit coordinator has primary responsibilities to develop audit schedules with the Federal Highway Administration audit coordinator in advance of the audit visit, to send Federal Highway Administration a self-assessment summary report, to track audit activities, and to coordinate responses to the pre-audit questions. Additionally, the OEM audit coordinator collaborates with districts and Federal Highway Administration during the audit visits and ensures timely response to the Federal Highway Administration audit report, including any follow-up action plans and issue resolution. The district will ensure staff and consultants are familiar with the MOU, ensure staff and consultants understand what NEPA assignment means, will make consultants available in person or remotely when requested as part of an audit, will work cooperatively with OEM audit coordinator and the Federal Highway Administration auditors, and will designate a logistics contact person to assist with all on-site arrangements. The district will also designate a primary district contact to work with the Federal Highway Administration audit team, and this person should be a manager. The districts refer Federal Highway Administration to OEM regarding requests for a program assessment review, will provide a timely response to the Federal Highway Administration audit request for follow-up actions, will develop appropriate, responsive, and timely action plans, and will fully implement action plans through resolution of all issues. Federal Highway Administration has an audit process which involves audit initiation, the audit visit, the audit report, and audit observations. These topics are covered in the next slides. Step 1. Before audit initiation, the Federal Highway Administration and OEM audit coordinators develop a general audit schedule within 180 days of the MOU becoming effective. This schedule covers when the audit will begin and end, and the major audit activities. Also, before the start of the audit, the Director of OEM sends the self-assessment summary report to Federal Highway Administration. Federal Highway Administration sends OEM the pre-audit questions for response. The OEM audit coordinator compiles the response to the pre-audit questions. Both audit coordinators develop a specific audit schedule with office locations and appointment schedules at least 2 weeks before the scheduled audit visit. This specific audit schedule will have employee names and appointment times. Federal Highway Administration audit team will initiate the audit with the audit visit explained on the next slide. Step 2. The audit visit involves conducting interviews with the project review work with the state. Preliminary work conducted by Federal Highway Administration and the state to prepare for the audit, such as reporting a work plan, crafting interview questions, making and responding to a pre-audit information request, or reviewing project files remotely via electronic means, does not trigger the 180-day period. As part of the audit visit, Federal Highway Administration selects an audit team and the team will select a sample of NEPA approvals and decisions for review and evaluation. The team arrives on site to review files, conduct interviews, and verify information, and the team prepares a report with findings and observations. The visit may take 1 or more weeks and will include visits to OEM offices, the districts, and resource agencies depending on the scope of the audit. Step 3, Federal Highway Administration will draft a report and send the report to the Director of OEM for review and comment within 14 days. The Director may request an extension up to 30 days for any comments. Federal Highway Administration posts the draft report with FDOT comments to the Federal Register for a period of 30 days for public comment. Federal Highway Administration then finalizes the report with FDOT and any public comments included. Federal Highway Administration notifies OEM and publishes the final report in the Federal Register. Step 4. The Federal Highway Administration report may include general observations and non-compliance observations. If FDOT is found non-compliant with NEPA and federal laws, Federal Highway Administration will indicate in the report a need for corrective actions for FDOT to respond. OEM tracks the corrective actions in SWEP, and districts track through implementation of their action plans. OEM will post audit reports with any actions required. Federal Highway Administration continues to monitor corrective actions through each annual audit. To summarize the audit process, Federal Highway Administration appoints an audit coordinator, sends pre-audit questions for FDOT response prior to the audit, designates an audit team that selects a sample of NEPA decisions and approvals for review and evaluation, drafts a report of findings and observations to send to Director of OEM for comment, posts a draft report to the Federal Register for a 30-day public comment period, finalizes and publishes the audit report in the Federal Register, and monitors corrective actions through FDOT self-assessments and the future audits until issues are resolved. We are now ready for a poll question, which is, why does Federal Highway Administration conduct audits? And the response options are A, used to assess FDOT's compliance with the MOU, B, determine if FDOT is following general accounting standards, and C, evaluate project-related decisions. And the correct answer for this question is A, used to assess FDOT's compliance with the MOU. We have another poll question, which is, 3 of the 7 core areas of Federal Highway Administration audit are staffing, quality assurance and quality control, and technical competency and organizational capacity. This is a true or false question, and the correct answer is A, true. We have one last poll question for this segment of the presentation, and that is, the Federal Highway Administration audit team is responsible to select a sample of approved NEPA decisions and actions to assess, and the options are A, review files, conduct interviews, and verify information, B, hold all fieldwork activities at central office, or C, send pre-audit questions for response after field work. And the correct answer for this question is A, review files, conduct interviews, and verify information. The final section provides tips for what you as an employee or consultant can do to prepare for the audit, particularly for the audit interview. The auditors will identify who they need to talk to in advance. It should not be a surprise, and you should already be aware and scheduled to see an auditor when they arrive at your location. A notice will be sent out statewide at the beginning of each Federal Highway Administration audit with the purpose and scope of the audit. If you work in the environmental office, you need to make sure you are aware of this purpose and scope. You will also need to make sure your files are complete and swept and your actions are documented. Documentation is an ongoing part of FDOT QC and QA process and should not be an issue at the time of an audit. SWEP will make this easier for you and much easier for the auditors. Remember, if you did not document your action, it did not happen. Additionally, you will need to cooperate with the auditors. Listen carefully to the auditor's questions and answer what is asked. Keep your answers short, focused, and accurate, and provide answers based upon your expertise related to your specific job duties. If you cannot respond to a question, tell the auditor that you do not know the answer. If you worked on a project but do not clearly recall the details to answer an audit question, let the auditor know you need to review the project file. Always respond to an auditor the same day, no later than within 24 hours. Again, if you need to review project files, be sure to respond to the auditor the same day or within 24 hours. Always be courteous and professional with auditors. If a conflict arises with an auditor, do not take action yourself. Complete your interview in a courteous and professional manner, then notify your supervisor of the conflict. Your supervisor will need to notify the OEM audit coordinator so that the matter can be appropriately resolved with OEM management and the Federal Highway Administration audit coordinator. We now have our last poll question, and that is, making sure my environmental project files are complete and my work is documented, understanding the scope of the audit, and listening carefully to auditors' questions so I may respond accurately will help me prepare for and assist with the audit. And the response options are A, true, and B, false. The correct answer for this question is A, true. I know I have presented a lot of information, and here I'm going to provide you a summary. FDOT is in a good position to be successful with both the self-assessments and the audits due to our current systems and processes and our new tools to make our jobs easier. To summarize today's presentation, the MOU requires annual self-assessments to review performance results of our 4 performance measures and compliance with NEPA and federal environmental laws. The first self-assessment will focus on Federal Highway Administration pre-audit questions and our readiness for NEPA assignment. We are in the midst of revising our PD&E chapters now. Self-assessments will have a planning phase, evaluation phase, and reporting phase. We are required to give Federal Highway Administration a summary of the self-assessment report no later than 1 month before the Federal Highway Administration audit begins. Other takeaways: Federal Highway Administration is required to conduct 4 annual audits by 23 U.S. Code Section 327G to determine if we are compliant with laws and policies and if we are achieving our performance measures. Audits focus on our processes and systems that ensure our environmental documents comply with law and policy. Audits do not focus on our project decisions. Our Federal Highway Administration audit team will review project files, interview district employees and/or consultants, draft and finalize a report to be posted in the Federal Register. Employees should be prepared, cooperative, and focused during the audit visit. This concludes today's presentation on self-assessment and the Federal Highway Administration Audit 101. If you have questions, please feel free to contact me, Eric Whitehead, at the information on this slide. The final part of our series today will be on SWEP,